What's up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Danny, everybody. Randy, what's up, Randy?
Yeah, Danny.
Okay, so I had this thought the other day, and just bear with me, I guess, and see what you think. So I was thinking, because I read too much sci-fi for sure, and this is why I think these things late at night. But I was thinking, like, what makes us conscious, and what role do memories play in that? Because, like, okay,
Ooh.
so if our brain is a connection of neural pathways, right, and the things that we think, the things that we feel, our actions are a consequence of neurons being connected in certain relationships, right? Like I like chocolate. I have ice cream. I like chocolate ice cream, right? There's a neural thing that makes it, right? So now you have a thing there that tells you that, so you know. What I was thinking was like, well, how important are memories then? Because if you scanned, imagine if you scanned somebody's brain, if we could scan it perfectly, we can make a copy of your brain and start over from now, just like blank. You have no memories, but you have all the same neural connections. Wouldn't that new individual then experience reality the same way as you because they have the same positive, negative, basically connections dictating like what choices they'd make in certain situations. So even without memory, it wouldn't really, they'd still be the same person and then they'd form memories moving forward.
Almost like
And
Blade Runner.
kind of, yeah, right? Similar to that sort of something like that. And this is where, obviously where this comes from because I forgot what I was reading exactly, but you know, that because consciousness has always been this like weird problem where we don't really, a lot of people want to assume that there's something more than the physical, right? That explains it away. But there's also, it's hard because even the physical itself doesn't seem to be enough to explain it. And maybe we're missing something, right? So there's a branch in philosophy called physicalism, which is literally the idea that, it destroys the mind-body problem by saying everything is physical. So all thoughts, all things are just, neurons firing in the brain, right? It's all a consequence of that. There's no mysterious mind realm. Like if you guys are familiar with the mind-body dualism problem, right? That was like Descartes tried to solve that with the pituitary gland, that connects the soul basically in the body. Because the problem of that is like if the mind is different than body, how does actions occur? How does it influence the physical realm if it's something outside of the physical, right?
Yeah, and they talk about that in physics with like the multiple dimensions. Like if you imagine two dimensions being a sheet of paper, and then you have a ball, three dimensions passing through it, when it's on the paper, it's only ever going to look like a circle. But it's
Yeah.
not a circle, it's a sphere. And so that stuff is crazy in terms of,
The
I mean, maybe.
dimensions are weird too, because from that perspective too, like as you add dimensions, you have so much more data
Mhm.
present in the thing. Like it's so strange, and but you can't experience them from the perspective of the lower dimension. I always found that really odd.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. And it's an interesting one because you look at like identical twins, okay? Now, even though they share the same genes, or I think most of
I think
50% of it,
most of
or
them,
all no,
right, or
actually,
something.
yeah, they share the same genes, and but they can have different life experiences. Even if they have the same, like let's say they both have an alcoholic father, one of them would make that the reason why they're going to be an alcoholic, and that's the way they go down the path of life. The other person is going to say, "Well, I'm never going to do that," and they go on to become president or something like that. And so there's
Well,
there's
it's
this whole
minor
concept of
differences,
nature
right,
versus
too.
nurture. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, minor differences in like their experiences throughout life, maybe even like things that happen in school and stuff might change those neural connections, which would change their character slightly. But yeah,
I'm
is there a difference really? I mean, like if our because I always thought like at least for me, like consciousness I always thought of as like something that was synthetic, that's created as we go.
hmm
Right. So like I always like as much as I dislike most of his theory, Kant's conception of consciousness I always liked. There's this idea that like that conscious I is a synthetic manifestation created through experience, that we form this conception of the I from experience and put it together kind of. We make it
hmm
our own. But it's not real. There's nothing like behind it.
it's not real, and it can change too. Like I know I keep talking about this guy all the time because I'm reading his books nonstop. But like David Burns, he's got a whole bunch of books on anxiety, depression, the most interesting books I've read in a long, long time. But he'll see patients who've been depressed or anxious for like 10 plus years, decades. Like they'll have fears of doing things like even going outside for like decades, or fears of germs and stuff like that for decades. And then he'll have a 2 hour session with them and completely cure it, like gone, where they can't even see the world the same way. They have the same memories, They have all
Yeah.
the same memories leading up, but all of a sudden he's changed the way that they think, and now those memories mean something completely different to them.
Well, here's the other thing I was thinking, and glad you brought that up because when we think of memory, like memory is one, it's notoriously faulty. So like that is true. We generally don't remember things as they actually happened because one, when they happen, we have an interpretation of it to begin with. And then as we remember it and go back to it based on whether it's good or bad, that interpretation tends to get emphasized. So like if it was a good vacation and you go back to that memory, it's going to get better and better kind of as the years go by, right? Because you keep growing that experience. Every time you revisit it, you kind of like push that level of positivity up almost.
Hmm.
Likewise, if it's bad, right? You make it worse. So our memories are not great. And I know like in my own life too, if I look back to myself when I was younger, like yes, I'm still the same person in the sense that there's that continuity. But like a lot of those memories, experiences, and stuff, like they have influenced who I became, but it's not like they're like necessary now for who I am either. I don't even remember all of it, right? Like a lot of it you forget. So how important is it? Is it just those pathways that make the consciousness? And then the larger question I was thinking about too was like if you had those two people, would they do the exact same thing then? Like if you threw them into the world with the one with the memories and the one without the memories, do identical things, and then yeah.
I don't think, I think even if people had the same memories, they would not do identical things. I, and
I think it's the pathways, the neural connections that matter, not the memories.
and because you still like, even if you have the same exact past, there's no way on earth that you can still have the same future. Like I remember when I went to veterinary school, it like every maybe not everyone. I was very concerned about getting the optimal. Yeah, probably not everybody. Other people could relax and enjoy their lives, but I was very concerned on getting the best veterinary education that I could because I didn't want to be a bad doctor. And so, like, I remember one of our professors saying to us, there's no way that you can have the best education. Everybody, every single person who's ever gone to the school has a totally different education because you study what you study, but you learn some things, you don't learn other things. You're naturally gifted in some things, you're not in other things. And so everybody when they graduate has a completely different education and ends up being a completely different doctor. But that's okay.
Yeah, and learning's funny too because just like everything else in life, like we're more likely, and this goes back to the neural connections, right? We're more likely to remember things that interest us or that catch our eye for whatever reason, right? So like we can both read the same book and we'll probably get different things out of it because we're coming at it from a different perspective of positives and negatives, right? I mean, that's gonna happen. So I think that's a really good way to look at it. Like all of our life experiences are like that. They're all gonna be somehow slightly different. And that's where I think, the more I was thinking about it, the more I was like, well, maybe it seems to be just like physically based, like, and almost like you form these certain pathways and logical, like to use a computer analogy, I guess like logical conditions and stuff. And those then inform the future choices, decisions, and things like that, because that's the base program you have to work with essentially.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not even like you know how sometimes your brain will like edit out things that aren't there. Like you'll be looking for your keys and they're on the table right in front of you, but you keep
Okay,
looking and you can't find them.
like it's not even like it'll edit out things. It's like 50% of what we actually see is just made up by the brain because it's
Yeah,
quicker. And
yeah.
most of that stuff is BS. Most of the things we don't need most of the time if you think about it, we really don't need that detailed information. We need a
Hmm.
general idea. That's why you don't see your keys because your brain's like, that's the table. It looks like this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? That it can just conjure this image.
Well, it's the same thing with people because like I had two experiences this week where like I very intentionally wrote a specific text message that included some information for people. And like it was two separate things. So it's not like it was a poorly worded one-time thing, but like both times the person on the other end of the communication completely missed what I put in the first message. And I was just like I was thinking to myself, am I that bad at like relaying
No.
information to somebody else? Are people just that distracted to where like they can't see the main piece of information in that? But I was just like,
No,
I
I
just
do
gotta
that
let it
all the
go. I don't
time.
know.
I do that constantly. I have this problem, and Anna gets pissed at me all the time because like she'll write something and stuff, and when I have this issue where like when I read things, I skim stuff horribly, especially if it's stuff like I don't like, not that I don't care about, but it's not like of immediate interest to me. I just skim it, and I don't even care if I'm right. So a lot
Yeah.
of times I just things completely, like just horribly. Like, and it's like,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? And I know it's the case, but it is, I get it's frustrating sometimes because it's like
Yeah.
I just totally don't see
But
it.
is that's another reason why I don't think that even with the same memories, the same brain, and as close a possible future as you could have,
Oh yeah, well I
I
was thinking,
still don't think you would have the same experience.
no, that's fair. So the
Because it's
experiences
like
might be
if a
different.
butterfly flaps its wings somewhere, doesn't it cause a hurricane and
Oh, the
about to
stupid
hit
butterfly
Florida?
effect thing. I mean, yeah, in some sense, right? Everything's connected. Yeah. Then it definitely hits Florida. And they call it Milton. The
Not
seriously.
the author, mind you.
No, not the author. I know. I made that. See, that's another case, right? Of like the experience thing. But it's funny too, I guess, because like the larger issue too is like our concept of self, like who we are. Is it just 'cause, like this is the other side of this was like, and this is I guess even more. Like, I don't know. We live in the moment, right? So we can't exist in the future. We can't exist in the past. We exist now.
But we
And it's
try our
always now.
best to do
We
that.
try our best. We do try our best. But it's always now. It's never going to be, now becomes the,
Thank you,
later.
Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, right? And so if you copied the same person's brain, right? In that moment, are they the exact same person? Because if the neural
Like the
connections are all the
moment you
same,
put that stuff into their brain.
and you turn them on, right? That
Yeah.
moment, if they're
Okay, I could
identical,
say yes.
is the self identical? That's my
Yep.
question because it's like, would their sense of self be the same? Would they? And this is the other more bizarre question that I had too. It's like if you would they have memories because they have the neural
Well,
connections? Would there
only
be
as soon as
some
they
shred?
think would they be the same self, because that's when the self exists, when you say I
Yes.
am this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
without thought, it wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
I think, therefore I suffer. That's what Descartes said, right?
Hmm. I think, therefore, it's hard.
Yeah.
And everything sucks.
Yeah.
Hey, Descartes famous for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what was I gonna say? Yeah, it's weird though, and it's like,
So
and I
what sci-fi book were you reading where it got you thinking about this
I
stuff?
don't even remember. That's the worst part.
Huh?
So this is what happened. So I read a lot of sci-fi. So I think it was more just that I read sci-fi. But one of the books I had been reading, oh, it was a short story. I got the Asimov uh,
Hmm.
journal yet,
Yeah.
and so it's a lot of short stories of sci-fi, and I was reading a bunch of them because I got a bunch of the copies. So I was reading like back-to-back short stories. But one of them, I think it was in that was where they were doing like it was like a short story, but it was like a teleportation thing. They were going to work real far away. They could teleport, but they couldn't move a physical person. So it was they were talking about the information, right? So like you break the person down, the information, scan them, send, reconfigure, whatever. You know,
Hmm.
there wasn't a ton of detail because it was a short story. But I think that's where I started to think about it. And then what happened was one night I woke up at like 2, couldn't fall back asleep, and then my brain just went there and I started thinking about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting thought. But
And it's funny because I feel like humans, we always want to leave open this because we don't know we know very little. Most of what we think we know is made up by us. The universe is crazy huge, crazy huge. So like it just seems like anything's possible. And to some
mhm.
extent it is, right? Like we don't know much at all. So I think on the one hand, when we talk of consciousness, I get why we want to like leave that little wiggle room for maybe it's this special thing beyond just the physical, because there's so much we just don't understand in the world, and that would make us, in some sense, I guess, be of a higher value, maybe, or just
Okay, so
somehow different. Just this. I
here's
don't know.
another
Maybe
thing. You know how people say like whales, they're so intelligent. You can like look at them and you can tell and they can communicate with all this stuff. And it's like when like when are we going to recognize that they actually do have consciousness, that probably in the same way that humans do? Like just
Oh, I
because
thought you were
we
just gonna start trashing whales. No,
yeah, these
I was like, here
dumb
it comes.
things. No,
Here it
but
comes. He's
like
like, those
just
stupid
like
idiots.
yeah, but it's just like because we understand our own communication, all of a sudden we think we have consciousness and we're
I
the
know, isn't
greatest
that
thing
funny?
ever. But
I
like
think I was,
dogs seem to be able to understand other dogs, and whales understand each other whales.
and they
And like
remember stuff.
just
They also
because we
remember
don't
stuff, a lot of
understand
stuff.
what they're saying doesn't mean that
Yeah.
we're the highest thing on this face of the planet.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just having a conversation with Andy the other day about that. I was like, because I was like talking, we were playing with the dogs, and I was like, I always wondered like what their experience of the world is. And I was like, I really think it is pretty much identical to ours, except that when we were like 2. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And so like they don't retain a ton of information. There's not like a ton, maybe not a ton. Like, could you, and I see that because that you can see them forget stuff. Like you
Yeah.
move a bag and they bark at it because like, what's that? Like, so clearly not everything's processed well, but it's probably the exact same to how we were then, like maybe no long-term memory and stuff. And then like those bigger animals like whales, elephants, I mean, they've proven that they have incredible memories. They've proven that they get upset when like, their young dies or something. It's probably a very similar experience. They just don't have vocal cords like ours. That's
Hmm.
the functional difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is funny, right? Like intelligence is probably a scale. And because everything, I mean, that's the other weird thing about humans, right? Like we know from a scientific standpoint, we're all evolution's kind of created all this stuff. And if we look at everything that's alive, it uses the same things over and over again. I mean, like,
Yeah.
what do they say? Like us and chimpanzees are like 99.8% shared DNA, and like us and like starfish is like 97% or something like ridiculous. Like,
And I mean, if you look at the size and scale of the universe and everything out there, it's like a mathematical probability that there's something more intelligent than we are.
yeah, naturally,
So,
right? Because I mean, like, it's just, yeah. And it's funny to think that like we have this special thing. And I get why we did in the past because we just didn't understand a lot. And it was a
mhm,
way to explain things, right? But like, yeah, it does seem like conscience is just that. And if it is, that means everything probably has it that has any level of intelligence, which is also interesting.
mhm. Yeah. Remember, I don't know if this is actually true. Like, you know how sometimes you have memories and you're not sure if they're true or if they're made up.
Yeah, dude,
But
all
like
the
I
time.
remember when I was in elementary school or something like that, they were talking about these like worms or something that could eat other worms and they would like inherit their memory. And they knew this because they put them through mazes and then they would feed it to other worms and they would know the way through the maze. You ever hear
Never
anything
heard of
like
that.
that? Okay.
Nope. But if that's
I
true,
could
that's
be making it
awesome.
up.
Okay,
Like
well, one, if that's true, it's awesome. Two, worms are weird, and I wouldn't. There, there might be because, dude, there's those weird worms that live in like the permafrost that freeze every year, and
Yeah.
they have an antifreeze in their blood so they don't die. It's
Man,
really weird.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so
pretty
worms,
interesting.
I mean, if it's possible for worms, it could be possible for people too.
Don't go eating
Maybe.
people's brains though. Try and gain their
Yeah,
experience
I
and
know.
courage.
You'll probably just get like Crutchfield's Jacobs disease and something else. Mad
I'll
cow.
get the courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well. There you have it, then. I guess, right? You want anything else? Okay,
Mhm.
so consciousness, the brain, stuff like that. I don't know. Just random thoughts we had, thought we'd share.
It
If
was
you
a
like
good
this
one.
episode, it was good. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I got that off my chest. I've been actually thinking about quite a lot, so whatever. If you like this episode, we'll be back later this week with another one. Check us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, share, subscribe. Helps us out a lot. Until next time, though, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.